Hello everybody, my name is Cyrus Jansen. I'm an American expat and China veteran of over 10 years, and if you're new here, we're making weekly vlogs about China and its role in society today. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different than my traditional videos where we're taking a specific topic and talking about it and presenting a lot of facts around that. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you a live stream that I recorded on Saturday, August 29th, 2020. Now this live stream was done with another YouTube channel called I'm in China, and I'm in China is a Beijing-based media company that focuses on making Chinese cultural videos. Now what's interesting is that this media company, they wanted to start to get some China insiders, people from around the world that have a unique perspective about China because they've lived in the country for a long time. Now myself, I've been an expat in China for over 10 years, and I was joined by another fellow American, a man by the name of Mr. Thomas Ripe, who was an accomplished journalist and first went to China in 1995. Now the two of us were asked a series of questions, everything from the 2020 election to COVID-19 to what Americans think about China in general. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode, so without further ado, I'm going to present to you the live stream that we recorded last week.
Would you guys agree that this is the lowest and worst the US-China relationships have been to date? Or you guys think it can get even worse in the future? Tom, let's go ahead.
I think the first part of that question is, are we in a new Cold War? And I would say not yet. I'm older than you guys. You can see the white in my chin here. I remember the first Cold War. I grew up in the 1980s, and I remember the bad relations with the Soviet Union. And there were no relations with the Soviet Union. There was no economic exchange at all. It was just really just a military rivalry. There wasn't much of an economic rivalry either. The Soviet Union never pushed the United States economically the way China can. And so that was just bad. There were no positives in that. There was no relationship. So you can't say there were positives. It was just all negative. There is still a lot of economic exchange between the United States and China. There's talk of decoupling, but to actually do that, the way that the international supply chains are tied together now is going to be a really long and difficult process. And a lot of companies are going to resist that process. A lot of people are going to resist that process. And so fortunately, I think it's a good thing that China and the US for now are still really tied together in ways, whether they like it or not, they have to find ways to cooperate. This idea of decoupling then becomes kind of dangerous, I think, because if you have full decoupling where the two countries don't have those economic relationships, they'd have less incentive to cooperate. So I think that's something to kind of keep an eye on. This interconnecting of globalized supply chains is something that keeps us from having World War III. Not the only thing, but I think it's important. The more dependent we are on each other economically, the less likely we are to start shooting at each other. As far as the relations and the way relations go, I think, yeah, it's gotten bad. I think the political situation in both countries, times are more stressful now than they were maybe 10 years ago. And all countries, and I think China and the US in particular, they're really big countries, and they have the luxury of being able to get very inward looking when times are difficult like they are now, in ways that smaller countries can't. And they tend to kind of turn in on themselves, and both countries are doing that right now. And I think that's causing some of this decoupling talk and some of this trouble. Ideally, things calm down and they start looking for ways to connect again. I think it could get better, but it definitely could get worse. It kind of depends on which way things go. But if the countries are feeling confident, and if everybody's feeling good about the world, they'll be more likely to cooperate. When they feel scared and threatened is when they start to look inward and become more xenophobic and less cooperative.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Tom. So let's go to Sarah. The same question I want to ask you. Do you agree that this is, at the moment, the lowest and the worst US-China relationship, or you think it might get even worse in the future?
Yeah, Chen, thank you. So first of all, Tom really hit on some great points there. And, I think I have to say yes. I do think that this is probably the lowest the United States and China's relationship has been. I mean, when we look at Nixon going to China in 1972, that was obviously really the formal start of the China-U.S. relations. And at that point, it was really trying to help China open up, teaching them some capitalistic ways. Obviously, the United States came in, and throughout the 80s and 90s, that's when the first companies were starting to invest into China. And I think basically, what I feel is, both the United States and China have gained tremendously from this relationship for many years. Obviously, the United States has gained tremendously in the sense that they can, manufacture so many of these products. And like Tom had said, you look at how our two economies and how the global supply chain is currently organized. They're so interconnected. It's not as simple as saying, we're going to ban TikTok and they've got to leave. I mean, there's just so many different layers that is very complicated to just remove. And it's almost really impossible because like he had said, like Tom said, there's going to be companies, many companies that have invested, millions and tens of hundreds of millions of dollars into China, to build this infrastructure. And for instance, the United States has gained tremendously, because they've been able to manufacture their products for a better price in China, then import them in for higher profits into America. But not only that, but in the last couple of decades specifically, they've been able to then re-import them back into China and sell them to a consumer base that is growing, and that grew from that relationship with that started with Richard Nixon and growing. So I think when we look at the entire 50-year history between these two countries, I think this is certainly a low point, and what I'm really interested to see is how this will happen really in the next 2 months, as we get to this American election. I think that I think there's going to be a very different tune that's going to be presented, let's say starting November 4th, and probably into 2021. I do think that the countries are going to have to realize, we cannot go down this path of starting a war. And, we've had a tremendous 2020 in many ways. And I think you're going to possibly see, potentially the next 2 months, it could get worse. But I think in 2021, I'm very optimistic. I mean, that, we have to sort this out, and I think that we will.
And I think there is a profound mistrust and disagreement on two, I'll say, different ideologies. So talking about ideologies, it's a very broad scale topic, but I want to break down and I want to ask Cyrus a question. How is your view on some of the deeper issues behind these two ideologies? What do you think of China's regime of CCP? First when you came to China or after a couple of years when you live in China? Do you think there are any advantages of this regime, and what are the things you think these two systems most people do not know about, Cyrus?
Yeah, great question, Chen. I think there's an interesting thing. Growing up in America, it's a very simple formula on America's view towards communism. It goes like this: communism equals evil. China is communist. China therefore is evil, or the regime is evil. Anything to do with communist has a very negative connotation. Now we know in China, people don't even really call it communist. It's more socialism with Chinese characteristics, is the way that they say it. Of course, it is a communist country, but we know that in many ways, they're a very capitalistic, obviously embracing, entrepreneurship and ability to really open up. I think really, for a lot of people, they just don't really understand how the Communist Party works. They don't understand the fact that there's 90 million Chinese citizens that are a member of the Communist Party, the fact that there are local elections that happen, and that it's a very, complicated system based on meritocracy in order to rise up these ranks. And, it's interesting. I made a video specifically about this on my YouTube channel last week, where I was talking about, our two systems, the democracy and, the China's one-party state. I think there's advantages to both systems. And my key message in that was saying, that both systems have been very successful. And so, over these last, obviously America has achieved tremendous success with their democracy, but what China's done the last 30 years with the one-party state has also been very successful. I think kind of the best way that I would describe it, I'm going to take this from Eric Lee, a fantastic speaker that really breaks down China a lot, and he said that, in China, you cannot change the party, but you can change the policy. And in America, you can change the party, but it's very difficult to change policy. And so, we kind of see this always in America. Again, we're coming up on an election. We're 2 months away from another election. We have, the nations being torn apart. And this is really one of China's greatest political strength, is the fact that every 4 years they're not subject to this cycle of just tearing each other apart. Every 5 years the government releases, a new 5-year plan. They have a very concentrated effort because every year, they don't have to go through this. Well, we have an election year this year. We know it's going to be difficult. I mean, the United States government, how can they really move forward in 2020 at this year? Because the current president is completely focused on getting reelected. His opponent is completely focused on getting into the White House. It's very difficult for the United States to move forward. So, again, I'm not anti-democracy. I think that, again, there's advantages to both systems. But I think a lot of people don't understand, that the Chinese government is actually very, it's not like North Korea. People think it's this dictatorship that only sees that goes. And I would say, Xi Jinping has a much different, style, the way that he does. He's throughout his career, when he was in Fujian for 17 years, from 1985 to 2002, he had a very big reputation for being very straightforward on corruption. He did have almost a zero tolerance policy on that. That was really part of his legacy throughout his entire political career. We saw that immediately in 2013, when he started really launching that campaign, and it was just a bit more extreme, than his predecessors. So that's where people are saying, look, it's this regime and it's really, authoritative. He's doing it a little bit different style than other presidents before in China. However, the Chinese Communist Party is continuing to, change and evolve and look at new things and trying to see how they need to pivot and move forward in the future.
Very interesting point. Talking about this issue, I want to share something about, Chinese people, our opinion about U.S. liberal democracy. First, we can see, as everybody can view, that I think two parties are fighting at the moment too extremely now. So it's been like very divided. And also, I think, for some people in America, in Chinese people's opinion, not all of them are fully aware of the scenarios of the geopolitical situation before they vote. So I think in this case, the leader might not be the best option for the country, but maybe on the individual level, they choose what they believe. And also, I think one of another disadvantages Chinese people think about U.S. democracy is really a lot of people are involved into the campaign and into the election. People are, if in China, for sure, government will put this amount of money in terms of infrastructure or global trading or certain type of other project. But I think in America, Chinese people are saying that, wow, there's a tremendous amount of money are putting into the election and making campaigns. So what a waste of money. So that's,
Right.
so that's what their opinion about. There's some good things and bad things. Talking about regarding the coronavirus, it seems like U.S. is not interested, or else I'll say the Trump's administration is not very interested at the moment in even attempt to show leadership on this matter to fight against the virus. And China also, I think, sees that. And so the thing is like, I want to also ask you, both of you, a question is, you think does the world at the moment need a leadership, either US or China, maybe another country? Or what we need at the moment right now, you guys prefer like a joint coordination? Or it's like there must be a leader? It's better to have a leader to lead other countries to show the leadership? Cyrus, what do you think about it?
Yeah. I think at this point, it's really difficult because I believe that China, really showed a very effective way of handling the virus. Now, the problem is that, there's a huge cultural difference between obviously China and the United States. I actually feel, United States was kind of destined to be the worldwide leader in COVID because, we have this freedom, we have the freedom. it's just culturally, there's a huge difference between the Chinese and Westerners as far as in relation to COVID. For instance, I'll give you an example. Here in Vancouver, we had, China, we have a tremendous Chinese population here. As soon as the outbreak happened in Wuhan, people were already starting to, stay indoors here. They were starting to wear masks. And, at that point, I remember thinking like, wow, it's a little extreme. To kind of, we're in Vancouver, and they're like, no, it's coming. Like it's definitely going to come. Like we need to prepare for this. And, we had people pulling kids out of school, and still to this day, this is almost September now, there are certain Chinese families that, they have not, they have they still really haven't left the house. They go out maybe for a walk or they get some, get some groceries, but they're not, doing what other Westerners here, or even in Canada or the US, as, going out to restaurants and, kind of resuming life as normal. So they're much more respective, I can say. And you could even say they're a little bit more scared of it, than Americans. So I think it's a difficult situation. That is why, for instance, China can lock down. China can shut down the entire country because of a virus. Chinese people are going to respect that. You're not going to have Chinese people going into the streets, I want my freedom, I want this. I mean, obviously they can't do that, right? I mean, they're not allowed to, but culturally, if they have the choice, they wouldn't do that either. And so I think that's the issue that we're seeing with the US is, and I think it's difficult. I don't think that you can have a worldwide leader because every country is different. You look at Sweden, they chose to do it a very specific way. You have, I mean, even for instance, local, schools in our district, they're choosing their ways of, how to handle a reopening. So, I mean, if it's so much down to the local level, I think it's really hard, to see. I mean, I think China really was a big leader, understanding, saying, look, this is what's happening. This is how we're dealing with it. We are doing a lockdown. I mean, I know that Jack Ma and Alibaba, I mean, they started an online, basically a forum where they connected doctors around the world to say, look, let's all contribute to this online forum. Let's all work together. I mean, obviously, Jack Ma, an amazing entrepreneur, but a philanthropist. I mean, amazing philanthropist, sending masks and medical equipment around the world. But I love his initiative in early March to build this online forum specifically for COVID to connect doctors around the world. So I think China has done those steps. But I think also, honestly, Donald Trump's done a terrible job, an absolutely horrific job managing this COVID crisis. And it's as simple as this: wear a mask early. I mean, if Donald Trump has a tremendous following in America, very loyal supporters, I honestly think it would have made a difference if he would have, swallowed his pride and actually wore a mask as early as March. I mean, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that he wore the mask for the first time. And so, that I think, America's, is getting through this. They're starting to reopen the economy. I think at this point, I think it's tough to have one leader. I think you're just going to have to press forward. Each country's going to have to do what they're going to do, and we're going to just have to kind of move on with life. I mean, that's our only option right now.
Exactly. Tom, what do you think about this? You think the world at the moment need a leader to lead other countries to get through and get over the pandemic, or we need more like I would say global joint coordination? What do you think?
I mean, I think in the best of all possible worlds, you would have seen the U.S. and China come together right at the beginning. You would have seen leadership from the WHO and other international organizations, and a global response where you could plan, figure out what materials need to produce. We need more PPE. We need ventilators. Try to mobilize it and get it to the right places. And you saw some of that at a lower down grassroots level, but at the top level, it was just not there. In the U.S. response that Cyrus was talking about, and it also gets into things that you were saying, Chen, about the polarization in the U.S. and the way the two parties just can't come together and get things done. So neither of those countries, because of some of the problems in their respective systems, neither one has been able to really lead. And so there's a weird situation in the world now where it's countries like New Zealand, which has a population of, I think, about 5 million, that are the ones showing leadership. And then other things that have happened, like here in Hong Kong, one of the things that was fascinating to me is it was the public leading the government. The government initially came out and said, don't wear masks because we're going to run out of them and we need to save them for health professionals. Mm-hmm. And I got here right at the end of January, right at the end of the Chinese New Year holiday. And that was when people were coming back into Hong Kong from China, coming back from visiting their families. And that was when the virus was first starting. And there were lines around the pharmacies like 2 blocks long waiting for masks. And even though the government said, don't wear masks, all the people here said, we've been through this with SARS in 2003. We know how this works, and we're just going to do it ourselves. Yeah. And so it was the public that was pushing the government to do the right thing. But you're really seeing an absence in a lot of places of real solid leadership in this crisis. But it's been, bits and pieces here and there and not coming together on a global scale. And I think here you see the danger of what happens when countries like the US and China can't come together, when instead of trying to cooperate and try to solve the problem, they just point fingers and blame each other. That's a real, and that's going to continue. This is not the last crisis the world is going to face. As we have more and more people on this planet, the crises are going to come more often and they're going to get worse. And if we can't all come together in some way to try to solve these things, we got real problems. I mean, things are going to get bad. It's going to be a rough century if we can't figure this stuff out.
I want to ask Cyrus a question. So what is actually the opinions from Americans' public point according to this regard, and how you think the U.S. and China relation at this moment, is that similar? American people all believe in what Mike Pompeo is saying?
Yeah, great question, Chen. I mean, I think, I addressed this earlier in a YouTube video where I talked about, the truth about Michael Pompeo and China. And, I opened that video with a statement saying, a very bold statement saying that every time Michael Pompeo opens his mouth, the Chinese people love their country even more. And I think and my point with that, the reason I said that is the fact that, a lot of the things that Michael Pompeo is saying specifically about China, I mean, frankly, they're just not true. And, he's saying, Chinese people are desperate to leave China. They're wanting to come to America to seek a better life. Yes, there's certainly Chinese people that love to immigrate to America, but it's not because they don't like China. They have business in China, but they want to, be an expat. They want to, be educated in the West. I mean, obviously, America has an amazing university system. They want to have, these opportunities to go there. Just like, like Tom and myself, we had an opportunity to go to China, in our careers. It doesn't make us, love our country any less or be scared of it. It's just the fact that that's how the world is working. I think, to be honest, though, when you talk to most Americans, they don't have a very in-depth knowledge of China. And I believe that most Americans fear China. And let's say if they fear China, if an American fears China, the real basis for that is the fact that they just don't understand China. If you take the average American and you ask them about Chinese culture or Chinese anything, they're not going to know anything about that. And again, that's nothing, to say that America is doing a bad job. I mean, that's just how it is. However, if you do the opposite, if you talk to the average Chinese person, they're going to know a lot more about America. Obviously, in China, everyone's starting to learn English at a very young age, especially this generation, the last 20 years, young students in China are all learning English. They have the American culture. They're wanting to watch Western movies. They're, seeing all of these Western brands like Starbucks and Nike and McDonald's and Apple, all of these things in China. So again, the average Chinese is going to know a lot more about America than the other way around. So I do think that, yes, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to believe Pompeo, his speech, saying that China is the greatest threat to the world. China is going to destroy America. I mean, China's all of these statements that he likes to make. And I think that's why I'm really trying to give some perspective on my channel. I think China, for example, I've never seen China go into another country and say, you should embrace communism. This is the way of the future. China is a very inwardly focused country. I always said, China is not anti-democracy in America. They're just anti-democracy in China. Do not come into our country and tell us what we should do for our country. So if you cross that line, that's where China is going to get aggressive. But I don't see China going to Korea saying, hey, you know what? You guys should try communism. It's been working out good for us. What do you think about that? No, I mean, Korea, you're fine. You do what you want to do. Again, they're just a very inwardly focused. But when you see, for instance, the situation in Hong Kong, for example, obviously, there was a tremendous amount of foreign interference going on in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a city in China. It's part of China. That's where they're going to get defensive. China's going to get involved in that. This is really the reality. So yeah, I do think that a lot of people in China, a lot of Americans, they're not very clear about China. And that is what we're trying to do, is create a channel for people just to understand China a little bit more, because at the end of the day, we have to work with China. Our economies are too connected. These two countries work better when they work together, and we have to find a solution.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cyrus. I think, I also want to share with both of you, also our audience in the channel. It's like, I think most of the Chinese people, they're not actually taking what Mike Pompeo's words very seriously. It's more like they laugh about him, and that's it. So let's talk about another topic. I think let's talk about the elections. And I think we're less than 3 months away. I know it's a very painful topic for both of you. I'm sorry. We're less than 3 months away from the U.S. presidential election. So where Donald Trump will be going head to head, have a fight and have a debate, maybe virtually with Joe Biden. So I think both two were officially nominated as the candidate for their parties of the race in the last past week. And I watched some video clips of the Democratic National Convention, and also yesterday I remember I watched one clip of the Donald Trump speech on the Republican National Convention. So it seems like they've been pushing all their policies and on their issues, and they've been also blaming another party for not handling the things correctly, or it's like not being tough to China or whatever. But I think there is a bipartisan issue, which is China. I think both parties, in my opinion, they're quite against China, and they want to be, whoever is elected, they want to be tougher on China. So, which they claim they have weakened the trust among their allies around the world because of China's, mishandling of the COVID-19 or some other issues. And now I have a question to actually to Tom. Tom, what do you think? Let's say if Joe Biden is elected, how do you think Biden's administration in the future, if he's elected, can change Donald Trump's American First policy, and how Biden will set the tone for, let's say, the U.S. new foreign policy, or let's say China policy? Tom, what do you think? It will be a continuity, or it will be like a new style from Biden?
I don't think it's going to be. It certainly won't be a continuation of what Trump has done, but I don't think it's going to be a really new style either. Some interesting things have been written about his foreign policy goals, and you can tell he's already started putting his team together, which is normal for a candidate at this time. They have to be starting to get ready, and they have foreign policy advisors that help them prepare for the debates, for example. And the people that he's brought in are people that have been around for a long time, and it's pretty clear that what he wants is not new, not a continuation of Trump, but a return to Obama era policy. Biden, you mean he's going to be the oldest. If he's elected, he'd end up being the oldest president ever. He's been in Washington for, I think, 47 years. And so he's going to want a return to what he knows, to what he's comfortable with, which is the China policy that we've seen for the last few decades. He is, however, going to be pushed. The American public now, as you were saying, Chen, is definitely more anti-China than it has been. There are real concerns about some of the competition between the two countries. Some of the intellectual property rights it remains a major issue. The fact that, for example, a lot of American financial institutions are not allowed to operate in China. Communications companies like Google and Microsoft does operate, but they're limited. Google just doesn't operate. And so American businesses see that there's a lot of opportunity in China that they're being locked out of by government action. And so it's not just the public, but it's various business sectors also that are seeing that they feel like there's not a level playing field between the two countries. And that's why you start to see now pushback. This was a new thing, Huawei first, and now with ByteDance, with WeChat. This is the first beginnings of some pushback where the United States is starting to restrict Chinese businesses the same way that China has been restricting US businesses. And Biden is not going to be able to reverse that. And I don't know that he's going to want to. I think the business sentiment in the US is less excited about China than it used to be. They're more willing to look at alternatives. They can manufacture cheaply other places. Wages have gone up in China, which is great for China, but that means that the cost savings of manufacturing in China are not what they used to be, which is why China itself has recognized that and is trying to push for higher end manufacturing. They want to go higher value because they know that low value manufacturing that they've been doing isn't sustainable long term. And so, I don't know that. Again, I think Biden is going to be less combative and less confrontational than Trump. And he's going to be more interested in building coalitions than Trump is. Trump doesn't really like to play with others. He wants to just do his own thing. Biden is going to be more willing to work with allies. But I don't know that I know Cyrus is going to disagree with me on this because he thinks there's going to be a big change after the election. I don't just because again the public sentiment and also the business sentiment I think is moving away from that, and the politicians to some degree still have to respond to where the public sentiment is. So Biden will change a bit, but I think it's not going to be a massive turnaround. It'll be a difference in tone maybe, but not as much of a difference in substance as I think some people are looking for.
Very interesting insight. Before going to Cyrus, I want to share some of my personal view about Joe Biden because also I've been analyzing some of his policies and reading some of his speeches, and I've been following him since the Obama's administration. So I think actually for this person, I think he will be more constructive towards, let's say, China or let's say U.S. allies countries when he's elected. I think personally, I don't believe he will host a very hostile China policy. I believe that style really matters in foreign relationships. It's not like the content and of your speech, but it's like how you approach to the different politicians or I'll say different world leaders. I think Biden has this style, and I think he has the charisma maybe to have a chance to really sit down with President Xi to talk about, come on, let's restart a negotiation with China and US about trading, about geopolitical issues, about let's say intellectual property rights and some other topics. So I think he has the charisma to form his style in terms of talking with China leaders. And rather than now, I think now it's more like a shouting match. This kind of the shouting game, I personally think it will not lead us to anywhere. So I think the same content with different approaches, maybe Biden can, let's say, create a little bit new optimism between our two countries. Cyrus, what do you think about that? You think Biden can set up a new tone, or it's going to be a new style, or I think you think it will be like a kind of continuity of Trump's?
It's definitely going to be different. I mean, I think Biden's style is certainly different than Donald Trump. I mean, I like a lot of the things that Tom said, and again, like to that point of I brought up earlier about my thoughts about the election and post-election. I mean, that is a theory that I'm kind of exploring right now, and certainly something that I'm hoping could be true. I don't know. I don't want. I mean, I think honestly, I think Donald Trump is certainly the favorite to win the White House. I think that Biden is the underdog. So I think very realistically that that we're going to have a little bit more of this hardline stance, this Donald Trump stance moving forward. But at the end of the day, my kind of thing is I feel that that Trump is a businessman. At the end of the day, he's going to have to realize that these two countries and our economies are too connected. Going back to the Biden question, I think I mean, again, he's that career politician. Like Tom had said, 47 years in Washington. I mean, he's going to resort back to those, kind of these principles that he's used to. He wants to appoint people that are similar to him, have that, great resume, that have been in Washington. And I think, a pivot back to say something like the Obama policy towards China, would certainly be a better thing. I mean, it would certainly be a refresher and I think that's kind of where a lot of people, if you're not supporting Trump, for example, and you're wanting to get Biden in there, it's just more, Biden's not a very great candidate either, but it's almost like, well, let's just kind of let's kind of pivot from where we're going. And he's not ideal, but it's at least a little bit better. Like you kind of know when you get Joe Biden in the office, I mean, he's going to be that career politician that many, United States presidents are. So, that's, you kind of know what you're going to get. Donald, obviously, you have no idea what's going to happen. There is an excitement there. That's why he got elected. I mean, he was elected because he's very entertaining. He's very different. And that's what got him into the White House. We'll see if he can, still get elected again. But yeah, I mean, I am hopeful that no matter who wins, that they are going to have to re-examine, this. But, the points that we've brought up as well, there's been a series of moves. I mean, for instance, getting rid of the consulate in Houston and then Chengdu. I mean, that's a really big deal. I mean, to just make those shut down. I mean, that's, there's, some people have said, maybe the damage is too big to repair, because they've just been, doing this tit for tat, fighting back and forth, but, we'll have to see. I am hopeful again, that we can have better relations with China starting in 2021.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your insights, Cyrus. I think that's what I mean, our both citizens are really wishing to we can have a better relationship. I think talking about the global images of America and China after the COVID-19 pandemic, like, and I found some very interesting quotation I want to share with everybody. It's like some scholars are saying that America is a young country with around 200 years history, which no change is impossible. And on the other hand, China is an old country. Nothing can be changed there. And another saying is that America is an open society with a closed mind. And China, on the other hand, is a closed society with an open mind. My next question to both of you is like, what do you think we can do as an individual to help our countries and the citizens to better understand each other? And can we coexist with each other under these two systems, or I'll say ideologies? Let's start with Tom.
Big question. As individuals, it's hard. You know, the big ideological stuff that you're talking about between the two different systems, we don't have a whole lot of control over that. We can have discussions with our friends and get on social media and be a small part of a broader public conversation that sometimes, I think even in China, I think people underestimate the extent to which social media conversations that happen in China do have some influence over the government. And in the US, maybe you almost have a problem if there's so much social media stuff going on that it's caused kind of a breakdown in the information flow, and that's also influencing things. But so you can have some conversations that have an impact, but I think mostly what we do is we talk to each other and we keep the conversations going and we keep these points of contact. We connect like we're doing today with like-minded people and try to share ideas and information. And it's part of the infrastructure that even if right now the two countries are pulling farther apart and the official channels are breaking down, at some point they're going to realize they need each other, and they're going to need people that have been in the habit of holding those conversations to kind of reboot the relationship. So it's just a question of trying to find understanding and trying to talk to people and trying to exchange information and ideas and keep that flow of information going between the two countries. Again, because I remember with the Soviet Union, there was very little flow of information between the two countries, and that really made it difficult. And there's never been, even after the Soviet Union ended, there's never been a real reset in US-Russia relations. It's still problematic. So I think the more of these points of contact you have, you've at least sort of got one foot holding the door open to keep the door from really closing. So I think that's the role that we can play.
Thank you, Tom. Very interesting point of view. Cyrus, what do you think? What do you think as individual, what we can do to help our countries, or I would say to influence our citizens around us to better understand another country and to promote and to really calm down the tensions and promote more prosperities in the future?
The biggest thing that I want people to realize is, that I think it's our responsibility, for instance, as Americans, we need to know a little bit more about other cultures around the world, but we need to, for example, so many people that are, let's say if you're believing what Michael Pompeo is saying about China, like how many of those people have actually talked to a Chinese person? To connect with your Chinese community, talk to Chinese people, ask them what they think of their government. I think many Chinese people are very supportive of the Communist Party. And again, many, even in your local community, the fact that they're living in America doesn't mean the fact that they've run away from China. It's again, they've come to America because of an opportunity, much like, we've gone to China because of an opportunity. I think the other thing that's just really important is we look at the United States and our history. I mean, we have gone around the world spreading our way of life. That has been, successful and unsuccessful in certain parts of the world. And again, I think it's just, when we look at our own issues that we're really facing right now in America, we have plenty of them. And I think it's just something where I'm really wanting America to focus inwardly, be a little bit more like China in the sense that, China really is focusing inwardly. They're trying to figure out their system. China comes first. And in America, we're just, for instance, we're putting all of this energy in different parts around the world where we have our houses on fire right now. I mean, you look at the amount of social issues and just kind of craziness that's going on in America. We have plenty of stuff for our politicians to be focusing on inward and a lot of resources that they can be, directing towards that. I think it's just impossible. For instance, America is never going to be China. China is never going to be America. We need to basically accept that there are going to be differences. We need to build on the similarities. And yes, I do believe that we can coexist because we have to. There's essentially two roads that we can go down. We're either going to go down a road towards a new Cold War that hasn't started, but we're certainly on that path, or we can pivot back to peace and we can learn to coexist and go back to that relationship that was present, when I first went to China in 2007, where the United States and China had a much better relationship. And I think we have to find that because I believe the entire world depends on that. You cannot have, the United States and China going to war. When that happens, everybody loses. The entire world economy is going to collapse. So, yeah, I do believe that we can coexist, and I think it's something that we all need to work on. And we just need to accept the fact that there's going to be differences. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that collaboration between the I'm in China channel and, of course, my channel called Cyrus Jansen. I want to thank you for taking your time to watch that episode. And again, if you're new here, I would love for you to consider hitting that subscribe button. If you like this episode, I'd love for you to drop a comment down below so that I can see it. I try to read most of the comments on this channel. I want to thank you all for your continued support. And if you're interested in supporting this channel, you can do so by clicking down in the description below. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support as we continue to grow this channel and help people around the world better understand China. Again, my name is Cyrus, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's episode.